The judge had a way of looking at me that made me feel like furniture, like something the courtroom had ordered in bulk and forgotten to remove. That's the part I keep replaying, more than the verdict, more than the recording, more than the moment Trevor stood up in his good Navy suit and called me a liar in front of 40 strangers and a man in a robe. I keep coming back to that look, because it was the first time in 11 years of marriage I understood what it felt like to be presumed guilty by someone who was supposed to know me better than anyone alive. I was sitting at the respondent's table in the Ontario Superior Court of Justice on Queen Street, wearing a charcoal blazer my lawyer, Priya Anand, had specifically told me to buy. Professional, she said. Not cold, not flashy. Something a judge could trust. My hands were folded on the table in front of me because I'd learned that if I let them sit in my lap, they shook, and I didn't want anyone in that room to see me shake. The radiators were doing that thing old courthouse radiators do, ticking and groaning. Somewhere behind me, a woman kept clearing her throat every 90 seconds like a metronome. Across the aisle at the applicant's table, Trevor Doyle sat in the suit I'd helped him pick out for his sister's wedding 2 years earlier, looking like the most aggrieved man in the Greater Toronto area. Then his lawyer leaned toward the microphone, and a door at the back of the courtroom opened, and a man walked in, and for about 4 seconds my heart simply stopped doing its job. Because I knew him. Of course I knew him. Just not the way Trevor was about to tell this courtroom I knew him. Your Honor, Trevor's lawyer said, the applicant would like to present evidence of the respondent's infidelity. I want to tell you how I ended up in that room, because none of it started there. It didn't start with a courthouse or a judge or a man walking through a door with his phone already in his hand. It started the way most disasters start, quietly, in a life that from the outside looked completely fine. My name is Claire Whitfield. I was 33 when my husband filed for divorce, and 34 by the time we were actually sitting across an aisle from each other in front of a judge. I'd married Trevor Doyle 3 months after my 25th birthday, which my aunt had called awfully fast, and which I had called knowing a good thing. We met at a fundraising gala in Yorkville, the kind where the silent auction items are worth more than your car. I was there because the design firm I'd just started had donated a logo package as a prize. He was there because his company had bought a table. He had a good handshake, and he remembered my name the second time he saw me, and at 25, in a room full of people who didn't, that felt like something rare. We bought a semi-detached house in Leslieville in 2016, exposed brick, a tiny backyard with a maple tree. Trevor swore every spring he'd build a deck under, and never once did. The mortgage was $2,890 a month, which felt enormous the year we signed and manageable a few years later once my business had actually started turning a profit. We had a condo board's worth of bylaws even though we weren't in a condo, because Leslieville neighbors have opinions about fence height. We had a rescue mutt named Pepper who ate exactly 1 pair of running shoes and 1 corner of the living room rug, and was otherwise the best decision either of us made that decade. Life had the comfortable weight of something being done correctly. My studio was called Birchline Creative. I started it with $11,000 of savings and a laptop balanced on our kitchen table, and by the time Trevor filed those papers, it was billing just over $410,000 a year, Canadian. I had 3 full-time designers, a lease on a small office near King West, and a client roster that included 2 national retail chains, and 1 government contract I'd fought embarrassingly hard to land. I was proud of it in the specific, slightly mortifying way. You're proud of something that has cost you enough of yourself, that it's become indistinguishable from your identity. Trevor worked in commercial insurance, underwriting. He was competent, not exceptional, but solid. and made around $98,000 a year, which he occasionally described as respectable, in a tone that made it clear he didn't fully believe the word. I never made a thing of the income gap. I genuinely didn't think it mattered. I was wrong about that, though I wouldn't understand how wrong for a long time yet. We didn't fight much. That's the first thing people ask, always. Were there signs? Were there arguments? And the honest answer is our marriage wasn't loud enough to fight in. It was more like a house where someone keeps turning the thermostat down half a degree at a time. And you keep telling yourself you'll deal with it later. And then one winter morning you realize you can see your breath in your own kitchen. The person who actually matters to this story is a man named Idris Bekele. Idris was 36, originally from Ottawa, a freelance UX strategist I'd brought on 18 months before the divorce filing. He came recommended by a client I trusted completely, had a portfolio that made me a little jealous, and charged a flat day rate of $700 that I didn't even try to negotiate because the work spoke for itself. We worked together on 2 major projects across about 1.25 years, maybe 40 meetings, most of them in our boardroom, a handful at a cafe on Queen East when our office was getting new flooring. We texted about deadlines and font weights and whether a tagline was landing or just lying there on the page. We were colleagues. That is the complete truth of who Idris Bekele was to me. Trevor had cited Adulteress entirely, and he'd apparently spent the better part of 5 months constructing a case around that decision. The first time something felt off, I dismissed it in under a minute, which is one of those moments I still want to shake my past self over. It was a Thursday evening in late September. I'd come home from a long day. We were mid-pitch for the government contract, and I'd been on calls since 7:30 that morning. I came in through the side door, dropped my bag on the kitchen counter, and found Trevor standing by the stove with his phone face down beside the kettle, wearing an expression that looked carefully assembled, like he'd rehearsed it in the hallway mirror before I got home. "Hey," I said. "Rough day. Is there any of that butter chicken left?" "Fridge," he said. "I found it. I put it in the microwave." I turned around, and he was still standing there with that same arranged stillness. "You okay?" I asked. "Fine. You sure? You look like you're chewing on something." "I'm fine, Claire." He picked up his phone and left the kitchen. I ate standing up at the island. I thought, he's stressed about the Henderson file. I thought, we should do something this weekend, just the 2 of us. It's been forever. I thought about the slide deck I still owed the team by Monday. I did not think, my husband is watching me. I did not think, he has already started building something. I didn't recognize the particular stillness of a man who's already made a decision and is simply waiting for the right moment. 2 weeks after that, I came home to find Pepper shut outside on the back step at 9:45 at night, in temperatures that had already dropped below freezing, which Trevor knew I would never, ever allow. When I brought her in, shivering, and asked why she'd been left out there, he said he hadn't realized how late it had gotten. I stood in the kitchen with her leash still in my hand, looking at my husband's face, and something shifted in my chest. Not alarm exactly. More like the first faint hum of a string being plucked somewhere far away in a room I couldn't see into. I should have followed that hum. I didn't. I found out exactly how far Trevor had gone about a month before the court date. Priya called on a Tuesday afternoon, and the tone in her voice, flat, careful, the particular calm of a lawyer rehearsing bad news before she says it, told me what was coming before she said a single word. "Claire, I need you to come in tomorrow morning. Trevor's lawyer filed a supplementary disclosure this afternoon. I'm reading it right now." "What's in it?" A pause. Photographs. A time-stamped report from a private investigator. Another pause. And a witness. I sat down on the floor of my office. There was a perfectly good chair 4 feet away. I sat on the floor anyway, with my back against the desk and my phone pressed to my ear, and said, "A witness to what, Priya?" "To you and Idris Beckley entering and leaving the Fairmont Royal York on the evening of April 9th. My brain went quiet for a second. Then it caught up. We had a client dinner. The client was staying at that hotel. We used the business center to finalize a deck because my laptop died and I'd left the charger at the office. We were inside for under an hour. Idris took an Uber home. I took an Uber home. I have both receipts. Do you have anything documenting the client meeting itself?" Emails, a calendar invite. The file with a timestamp showing it was last edited on the hotel's network. I was already on my feet, already moving toward my laptop. "Priya, I have everything." "Good," she said. "Bring all of it tomorrow." I spent that night assembling 6 months of documentation. Invoices, emails, calendar entries, ride receipts, meeting notes, client threads that referenced Idris by name in a strictly professional context. 43 separate pieces of paper showing that every interaction Idris Beckley and I had ever had was scheduled, billable, client-related, and almost aggressively boring. I printed it, tabbed it, organized it into a binder with my studio's logo embossed on the spine, because of course it was. I didn't sleep. I drank 2 pots of coffee and watched the sky over King Street go from black to gray to that pale, cold gold a Toronto morning gets in late autumn, and I thought, let him try. That was the thing Trevor had miscalculated. He'd spent 5 months building a story. I'd spent 11 years building a business. And running a business teaches you exactly one lesson above all the rest. Documentation is everything. You document your contracts, your decisions, your hours, because the world is full of people who'll remember things conveniently differently than they happened. The only thing that cuts cleanly through 2 competing versions of reality is a paper trail. I had the paper trail. Trevor didn't know that yet. The morning of the hearing, Priya met me outside the courthouse at 8:45, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing what I'd come to think of as her court face. Stiller than her regular one, more precise, like someone had turned a dial. "He's going to make this ugly before it gets better," she said. "Let him. Don't react. Don't look at Trevor. Don't look at the witness. Look at me or look at the judge. When it's our turn, we walk him through every single page." "Understood." She put her hand briefly on my arm. "I've read everything you gave me. You're going to be fine." I nodded. I didn't entirely believe her. I walked in anyway. The first part of the morning was procedural, motions, objections, things I tracked only at the surface while my body held very still in that charcoal blazer. Trevor's lawyer, a man named Gerald Fitch, with the smooth, unbothered confidence of someone who has never once doubted himself in a courtroom, walked through the asset division, the grounds, and then pivoted to the infidelity claim like a man who already knew how the afternoon would end. "Your Honor, the applicant alleges the respondent engaged in an extramarital relationship with Mr. Idris Beckley, a contractor retained by the respondent's firm, over a period of approximately 14 months. We have photographic evidence, a private investigator's report, and a witness prepared to testify to the nature of the relationship." He called Idris to the stand. Idris walked the length of the courtroom, and I watched him do it. Here is what I can tell you about Idris Beckley. He looked completely calm, not nervous, not ashamed. Nothing close to the way a person looks when they're about to take part in a lie. He sat, folded his hands in his lap. And when the clerk asked him to state his name for the record, he said it clearly, no hesitation at all. Gerald began with the photographs, handing copies up to the judge one at a time. Mr. Beckley and the respondent entering the hotel. Mr. Beckley and the respondent at a cafe on Queen Street East. Mr. Beckley and the respondent in the parking lot of the office, standing close together, apparently mid-conversation. Mr. Beakill, Gerald said, how would you characterize your relationship with Mrs. Doyle? Idris looked at him. Then he looked at me. Then he reached into his jacket and took out his phone. Your Honor, before I answer that, I'd like permission to play a recording. The room went very still. Gerald's head turned toward Idris with the particular sharpness of a man hearing something nobody had cleared with him first. The judge, Justice Eleanor Marchetti, leaned forward. What kind of recording? A phone call between myself and Trevor Doyle, Your Honor. Recorded here in Ontario, which is a one-party consent jurisdiction. I'm one of the parties on the call. It was recorded on August the 11th of this year, roughly 2 months before these proceedings began. Priya was on her feet before Gerald could get a word out. Your Honor, the respondent would like to hear this recording and move to enter it into evidence. Objection, Your Honor. This is completely irregular. The witness cannot, simply. It's a statement by the applicant, Priya said, her voice perfectly level. It bears directly on the credibility of the evidence being presented. Justice Marchetti looked at Gerald. She looked at Priya. She looked at Idris. I'll hear it, she said. Go ahead. Idris pressed play. The audio was clean, clear enough that Trevor's voice filled the courtroom with no room for doubt about who it belonged to. And what that voice said, in a call Idris had apparently anticipated long enough in advance to record, was this. Idris, listen, I know you and Claire have a professional thing going. I get that. But I need you to understand what's on the line for me financially. She built that company during our marriage, which legally makes half of it mine. But my lawyer says if I can show infidelity, it changes my position on the assets significantly. I'm not asking you to lie, exactly. I'm asking you to be vague. Just don't deny anything if you're called as a witness. Let people draw their own conclusions. I'll make it worth your while. I'm talking 25 grand. The silence after that had actual weight to it. I felt it pressing down on the room the way humidity does before a storm. Then Trevor's voice again, from the recording. You've been alone with her in hotels, coffee shops, late nights at her office. Nobody needs to know what did or didn't happen. They just need to wonder. Idris stopped the playback. I looked at Justice Marchetti. The contempt that had been sitting on her face when she looked at me that morning was still there. It just wasn't pointed at me anymore. Gerald Fitch had gone completely still at his table. Trevor, beside him, had turned the particular gray-white color of a man watching the floor open beneath his own chair. Priya was already moving. She submitted Idris's full account, a written statement, the metadata confirming the recording's date and time, and a text Trevor had sent Idris 3 days before the call that read, simply, think about what I offered. It's a good deal for you. She submitted my binder. All 43 exhibits, tabbed and indexed, including the hotel's business center login record showing 41 minutes between sign-in and sign-out on April 9th, and a client email thread starting at 9:24 that same evening referencing the finished deck. Then she stood at the podium and said, in that level, exact voice of hers, Your Honor, the applicant did not discover infidelity. He manufactured the appearance of it and attempted to bribe a witness into supporting a false narrative. The respondent has documentation refuting every exhibit the applicant has submitted, and the applicant, in his own recorded words, has admitted there was nothing here to find. We would like to discuss sanctions. What followed over the next several weeks was not fast and it was not painless, and anyone who tells you justice feels clean has never sat through the actual administration of it. There were more hearings. There was a formal inquiry into Trevor's conduct, specifically the attempted bribery of a witness, which under Ontario law is a serious matter, regardless of whether the bribe was ever accepted. Gerald Fitch withdrew from the file entirely. Trevor hired a new lawyer, quieter, and her whole posture in the subsequent hearings was the posture of someone trying to limit the bleeding rather than win anything. The division of property was ultimately ruled substantially in my favor, on the basis that Birchline Creative had been built almost entirely through my individual labor, expertise, and client relationships, and that Trevor's contribution to its growth wasn't demonstrable in any material way. I kept the studio. I kept the client list. I kept the King West lease. The house in Leslieville, the one with the maple tree and the deck that never got built, was ordered sold, equities split, which came out to a little over $81,000 each after the mortgage was cleared. It wasn't what either of us would have chosen for ourselves, probably, but it was fair. Trevor was separately referred for an investigation into witness tampering. In the end, he pled to a lesser charge, took a fine and a period of probation, and I found out the resolution had been finalized through a 2-line email from Priya. I didn't feel triumphant reading it. I felt tired in a way that sat in my bones. Idris texted me the day after the recording was played. He came to me 2 months ago. I told him no on the spot. Then I started recording. I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry I didn't. I wrote back, you showed up when it mattered. Thank you. We haven't talked much since. He's working with other studios now. I think about him sometimes, about the specific kind of integrity it takes to record a bribe attempt and then walk into a courtroom and detonate it in front of a judge, knowing it's going to blow up a situation that had nothing to do with him in the first place. That takes something I don't think I have a precise enough word for. Pepper's with me. That part was never up for negotiation, and to his credit, Trevor didn't fight me on it. The one thing in the entire process he got cleanly right. I'm in a 1-bedroom in Riverdale now, 2nd floor, good light, no bylaws about fence height. Birchline Creative had its best quarter in company history about 6 months after the divorce was finalized. There's something about surviving a thing that was designed, deliberately, to take you apart in public, that sharpens your focus in a way I'm not sure anything else could have. My team knows the broad shape of what happened. We don't talk about it much, we just work. My mother called the week after the final ruling. I never liked him, she said. Mom, you came to our wedding. I wore navy. I laughed for the first time in what felt like months. It wasn't a big laugh, but it was real, all the way through. Here's what I understand now that I didn't then. A marriage can die from silence as completely as it can die from shouting. I spent years in a house where the thermostat kept dropping a degree at a time, telling myself I'd deal with it later. And by the time I understood what was actually happening, Trevor had already decided I was a problem to be managed, rather than a person he'd promised to stay beside. I don't know exactly when he made that decision. I'm not sure it matters now. What matters is this: I documented everything, not because I suspected anything, just because that's how I run my life. And when someone tried to weaponize the truth by burying it under lies, the documentation cut straight through all of it. Keep your receipts. In business, in marriage, in everything. Not out of paranoia, out of respect for your own version of events. Because one day someone may try to convince you your life didn't happen the way it happened. And the only thing standing between you and that rewritten version will be the proof you thought to keep before you ever knew you'd need it. The house in Leslieville sold to a young couple who, according to the agent, said on closing day they were finally going to build that deck under the maple tree. I hope they do.